Hi, RJ here for another in my series on the Lee Loadmaster press. What I'm going to talk about here is mods that I've made to the Gen 3 primer trough assembly. I still found some issues with this primer trough and feeding system that I really felt smoothed things out and made things more reliable and better operation. What I have in my hand is a standard Gen 3 primer trough assembly. What I want you to show you here, this of course is the actuating lever that does the feeding, and essentially what we're going to focus on for this mod is how far back it travels, how far rearward it travels in order to reload another primer. And essentially what prevents any further movement to the rear is this channel right here. The pin will hit the back of this channel. Try to come in and show you a little bit closer. Back here, when this pin on the slider hits the edge, then that's it. No more travel. So the U-shaped channel or the oval channel is what controls the forward and rearward movement. Now, if we turn it over a little bit more and look, when it's at its rearmost position, notice that the primer slider is essentially flush with the back of the primer trough. So that's just kind of a marker so you know how far back that goes when I remove all the pieces to expose the tray itself. So let me bring a different Gen 3 assembly into view with the top removed, and I want you to notice that the slider is not yet all the way back. We have a primer ready to go in the position to load onto the pin, onto the primer pin, and we still have a gap back here. But remember that as this thing is moved, let me set this on the table to kind of steady it, that it will go all the way rearward to where it's flush. So now notice that we've got some air right here. There's a primer ready to go. There's another primer that's just about ready to sneak in. In fact, I found that after, maybe 100 loads or so, there can be enough wear on the slider in this area right here that the next primer can actually slip in and slip in behind the one that you've got. And I'll kind of demonstrate that here. We'll just put a little bit of pressure on things here. Well, that wasn't exactly what I wanted to do, but let's see if we can do that again. Hard to demonstrate. More primers on the floor. Okay, here we go again. Just be patient, and you'll see why I made this mod. It's very hard to do this, to demonstrate this in front of a camera without primers falling out. But what I want to show you is that I essentially am getting very close to having a double feed with this the way it is right now. The slider is pretty much in its most rearward position, and we almost have a second primer that is snuck in there behind the first. This is disastrous. It leads to lost primers, it leads to tilted primers, it leads to no primers, it leads to a number of issues. So let me show you what I did to correct this particular problem. What I've got here is another Gen 3 primer assembly, and you'll notice that there's been a mod here. This is just a small little part that I pulled out of my junk drawer, small little piece of plastic, and essentially it has two protrusions, one there and one there, and the number of protrusions really isn't what matters. What matters is the function of this white piece of plastic is to prevent the slider from going any further rearward than is absolutely necessary. So you can use anything that you can get your hands on to try to limit that rearward travel. This was the most the easiest and simplest way for me to do this. And as a matter of fact, I have spares of these white parts to fit to other primer troughs should the need arise. So the thing that's critical about this is this dimension here, and it's about a 1/16 of an inch is all you need. The distance that you're trying to prevent it from coming back. The distance between the back of the primer trough and the actual rear part of the slider should be about a 1/16 of an inch. Another critical dimension is this white piece can't be too thick, because if it sticks out too far rearward of the trough, then it begins to hit the frame of the press, and you don't want that. So that too is limited to actually probably a little less than a 1/16. I had to grind the back of this plastic off so that it wouldn't hit the back of the press. So let me show you what happens when we get some primers in there. Put this back together, slide a few primers in. That should be enough. So got the slider back as far as it'll go, rearward. And notice that there's just no way that I'm going to get a double feed. And yet I'm perfectly positioned to push that primer onto the primer pin. I'll demonstrate that. I'll push this forward, and onto the primer pin it goes. So there you go. That's a very good mod to make to reduce your double feed problems with the Lee 3rd Gen primer. Now, I want to show you another mod that I made. Let's see, what do we got here? This is a simple mod. Others have done this, but I just wanted to go ahead and show it. When you put the actuator lever on, there are a number of folks that talk about having to file away the case retainer corners a little bit so that this doesn't catch on the case retainer. I found that even doing that really didn't solve the problem. I wanted an absolutely smooth movement of this. And so it's very simple. You just need to lift this a little bit. So what I did is there is, I believe, a number 10, it's either a number 8 or a number 10 washer. It fits perfectly onto this plastic shaft. And that gives you enough spacing to lift the actuator up above the case retainer and absolutely totally prevent you from having any kind of problems having to do with snagging on the case retainer. And still offers the same smooth movement. The O-ring still provides the friction that's required. And so there you go. That's the totality of the mods that I've made to the Gen 3 system. So what we got to review, I've got tape on the round portion of the trough that makes this whole assembly fit tighter into the well on the carrier. I've got a piece of specialized, well, not specialized, but a piece of custom fit plastic to prevent unnecessary rearward travel of the slider. So it can only go back thus far. It's not parallel to the case in the rear. It's actually only goes to within a 1/16 of that, and that's handled by this piece of plastic. And then finally, the washer on the actuator lever itself to lift it up. So stay tuned for more Lee Loadmaster modification mods.